My name is Diana Whitmore, and I need to tell you about the day my wedding became a courtroom. My reception became a trial, and my parents finally learned what happens when you underestimate the woman you raised. This is not a story about a girl getting revenge. This is a story about a woman who simply let the truth speak for itself and watched as everything her parents built on lies crumbled in front of 300 people. It started 3 months before I married Daniel. My mother began making small comments about money and security. My father asked strange questions about Daniel's bank accounts. At Sunday dinner, their smiles never reached their eyes. Every compliment toward Daniel came with a pause, like they were tasting something sour. "He is ambitious," my father would say, which somehow sounded like an insult. My mother started talking about prenups and how marriage changes financial things. She kept saying love is wonderful, but so is security, as if I needed to be warned about something I had not even asked about. Then they gave me a document. They called it an estate clarification form. They wanted me to sign it before the wedding. This form would make sure certain family assets stayed only with people who shared my blood, not with people I married. I read it 3 times, and each time I felt less protected and more excluded. I felt like my parents were building a wall between me and the man I loved, brick by brick, lie by lie. I refused to sign it. That was when their smiles completely stopped reaching their eyes. That was when I knew something was very wrong. 2 weeks before my wedding day, my cousin Brianna called me late at night. Her voice was nervous and quiet. She told me my parents had been telling people that Daniel was marrying me only for money. She said they claimed to have proof that he was in debt. They said he was strategically positioning himself to take control of the family money. They said they were ready to intervene if they needed to. I felt my stomach drop when she told me this. My own parents were spreading lies about the man I loved. I confronted them the next morning. My mother cried instantly, with tears that felt designed for an audience. My father accused me of betrayal for believing gossip about my own family. But something changed inside me that day. I stopped arguing with them. I stopped trying to make them understand. Instead, I started watching. I started paying attention to every small thing they said and did. I realized they were not trying to protect me. They were trying to control me, and they were willing to lie to do it. At a family brunch, I overheard my father whispering to someone on the patio. He said the name Thomas Hale. Thomas is our family accountant, someone who has worked with our family for 20 years. That same evening, I texted Thomas casually, like I was just checking in. But his response was nervous. He sounded scared. He mentioned that my father had asked him to do a background review on Daniel. He said my father wanted financial history, investment trails, and risk assessments. None of it was illegal, I understood that. But it was not normal either. Daniel and I shared our finances completely. We had nothing to hide. So if they were digging this hard, they were not looking for truth. They were looking for something they could use against him. They were looking for leverage. One day, a family friend forwarded me an email by mistake. It was from my father. In this email, he claimed that Daniel had a pending lawsuit. He wrote that marrying me would shield Daniel from liability. He said he feared I was being manipulated by someone who wanted to use me. Every word was carefully chosen to make Daniel look guilty. But the lawsuit did not exist. The details in the email were twisted versions of an old business dispute that Daniel had resolved years ago, long before I even met him. My father had taken something that was finished and dead and brought it back to life as a lie. I understood then that they were no longer just investigating. They were constructing a story, planting it carefully, watering it so it would grow. And they were doing this right before my wedding. They were going to hurt me and the man I loved because I would not let them control me. I did not confront them about this email. Instead, I forwarded it to Daniel. He read it 2 times, very slowly. Then he said something I will never forget. He said, "Okay, if they want a narrative, we will give them the truth." In that moment, I knew he understood. He understood that we could not fight lies with anger. We could only fight lies with evidence, with documentation, with the quiet, boring power of truth. We hired an independent forensic accountant. We did this quietly without telling anyone. We were not trying to defend ourselves. We were trying to document everything. Every rumor, Every communication, every timeline inconsistency, every small lie and big deception. Daniel continued to be polite around my parents. He smiled and toasted and played the respectful fiancé. My mother thought his composure meant weakness. My father thought his patience meant ignorance. But behind the scenes, we were building a file. We were collecting proof. Because lies collapse fastest under light. We just needed the right moment to turn on the switch. 1 week before the wedding, the venue coordinator called me in tears. Someone claiming to represent the Whitmore family estate had tried to cancel our payment authorization for the reception. My father had tried to freeze our deposit. If he had succeeded, it would have publicly embarrassed Daniel's family on the day of our wedding. But Daniel did not yell or confront him. He calmly paid the entire balance from his own account. No announcement, no drama, no confrontation. He just handled it. But now we knew the full extent of what my parents were doing. They were not just spreading rumors anymore. They were trying to sabotage the actual event, the actual day, the actual moment when I would marry the man I loved. At my final dress fitting, my mother stood behind me, staring at my reflection in the mirror. She said something that chilled me. She said, "Marriage is not always permanent." It was not concern. It was calculation. She was already planning for the possibility that I would leave Daniel, already expecting my marriage to fail. She asked if Daniel would be signing anything protective before the ceremony. I smiled and told her everything was handled. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Because everything was handled. It just was not handled in the way she expected. Brianna sent me a voice memo. She said it was accidentally recorded during a small family gathering at our parents' house. I pressed play and heard my father's voice very clearly. He said, "We will let the ceremony proceed. But at the reception, the truth will come out." My mother added, "Public humiliation will open her eyes." I listened to it 3 times. They were planning a reveal, a performance, a moment when they would expose Daniel in front of everyone we love. They wanted to humiliate me at my own wedding, so I would finally do what they wanted. Daniel listened to the recording beside me. He did not raise his voice. He did not get angry. He just said, "Then we let them." He meant we would let them go through with their plan. We would let them reveal what they had planned to reveal. We would let them stand up and make their accusations. And then we would show the entire room what the truth actually was. 2 days before the wedding, a sealed envelope arrived at Daniel's office. Inside were printed financial summaries, but they were filled with altered numbers, fake debts, and fabricated liabilities. The sender was anonymous, but the formatting matched the template from Thomas Hale's office. We contacted Thomas immediately. He panicked. He admitted that my father had pressured him to compile projections framed as worst-case scenarios, and then my father had selectively edited them to make them look like actual debts. Thomas agreed to provide a written clarification, explaining what he had actually done and what my father had actually done. Now we had something solid. Not emotion, not anger, not drama. We had evidence. At the rehearsal dinner, my father raised a toast. He said, to clarity. My mother smiled too widely, like she was playing a part in a play. They thought the next day would be their stage, their moment to shine, their chance to humiliate me and control my life. Daniel toasted back. He said, to truth. Only I noticed the flicker in my father's eyes, because truth was not on their script, but it was on ours. When the wedding day finally came, relatives behaved strangely throughout the ceremony and reception. Whispers spread like a virus through the room. I discovered printed packets hidden in my mother's handbag, labeled for after ceremony. Inside were the fabricated financial reports, ready to be distributed like evidence at a trial. Daniel quietly confirmed that the venue's audio-visual system could connect to external audio. We prepared a counter-reveal with the precision of engineers building a bridge. We knew exactly when to speak, exactly what to show, exactly how to let the truth emerge. When the reception reached its peak, when everyone was gathered and watching and waiting, Daniel stood up. He walked slowly to the center of the room. His voice was calm and precise. He held up the signed clarification from Thomas Hale. He explained what the accountant had actually found and what lies had actually been constructed. Guests leaned in. My parents' whispers turned into stammers. Every lie, Every manipulated figure, every attempt at control, every scheme designed to hurt us, unraveled in front of our friends and family. My father's face tightened like he had been physically hit. My mother's hand trembled. They had built their entire identity on influence and subtle intimidation and the ability to make people do what they wanted. Now that power was crumbling in front of everyone they had tried to impress. Daniel held up another document, time-stamped emails that proved my parents had been coordinating this entire campaign together. For the first time in their lives, they were powerless in a room they thought they controlled. My mother's veil-like fascinator slipped as she turned toward the exit. She muttered something about misunderstanding, but her voice had no conviction. My father's jaw was set, his usual commanding tone completely gone. Guests began returning to their seats, subtly glancing at my parents, but no one joined them. No one stood with them. No one said they were right. Their power had evaporated like water in the sun. They gathered their coats silently, avoiding eye contact with everyone in the room. Every step they took was measured and ashamed. The guests whispered quietly, some nodding to me, some nodding to Daniel. I felt a strange calm, not the hot rush of victory, but the cool quiet of justice. There was no victory speech, no drama, no moment where I screamed at them or told them they were wrong. Just quiet acknowledgement that control had shifted from their hands to mine. When they left, the room exhaled like it had been holding its breath. The celebration resumed, now fully ours. My wedding was no longer a battlefield where we fought for survival. It was a stage for truth, a moment where honesty won and lies lost. I danced with Daniel while my parents' car pulled away from the venue. I celebrated with people who loved me while my parents drove home, knowing they had lost everything they had worked so hard to protect. Weeks later, I received a formal written apology. It was short and precise and carefully worded. There was no emotion, no warmth, no real understanding of what they had done. But it did acknowledge boundaries they had crossed. I read it 2 times. I smiled once. I filed it away in a folder and never read it again. I did not need a theatrical confrontation or a dramatic moment where they begged for forgiveness. Silence and evidence had done all the work. They had done all the talking that needed to be done. Life returned to normal. Daniel and I focused on our marriage, our home, and planning for our future. My parents were still in my life, but the balance had shifted permanently. They could no longer whisper demands. They could no longer threaten or manipulate. They could no longer build lies because everyone in our family now knew who they were and what they were capable of doing. The lesson was clear to everyone who had been in that room. Power built on lies always collapses under truth. It might take time. It might require patience and planning and the collection of evidence. It might mean swallowing your anger and playing a part and waiting for the right moment. But eventually, the truth will win. I had survived betrayal from the people who raised me. I had documented it. I had presented it to the world. And I had reclaimed my life. And the only thing that truly died that day, the only thing that was actually buried, was their control over me. That was the funeral my parents had planned to attend. That was what they had come to mourn, dressed in black, with their lies and their schemes and their need to control everything I did. They came to bury my happiness, but instead they buried their own power. They came to destroy my marriage, but instead they destroyed the image they had spent decades constructing. They came to humiliate me, and instead they humiliated themselves. This is my story. This is the story of a woman who stopped running from her parents' lies and started walking toward the truth instead. This is the story of a man who loved me enough to help me fight back in the only way that matters. This is the story of a wedding that became a reckoning, a celebration that became a revelation, and a revenge that was not loud or violent or angry, but quiet and true and absolutely, completely devastating to everyone who deserved it.